Now, developing nations say that they will need trillions of dollars in climate finance to cope with the impacts of climate change as negotiations to reach a new agreement take place at the COP29 climate conference in Azerbaijan. Richer developing countries, including China, are being asked to pay up.
Summer in China's Shandong province. A lack of water and cracked riverbeds has had an impact on local farmers.
When it was not dried up, the water was just a couple meters away from the road. Now it's shrunk and dried up. The irrigation for farmland and drinking water supply for the city both depend on it.
Scorching heat baked the region for over a month, one of the extreme weather events that have been hitting China hard. Heat waves are being made stronger and more likely to happen due to the burning of fossil fuels that are driving climate change, most of which is currently happening in China, the biggest greenhouse gas emitter, emitting almost twice as much as the second largest polluter, the United States, and other big emitters like India, the EU, and Russia.
China is still hesitant to control or scaling down its coal power fleet. In the past years, 2 or 3 years, we still see new approvals of coal power plants. It's starting to slow down, but in an absolute term, it's increasing. So that's a concern.
China's high emissions are one of the reasons negotiators from industrialized countries at the COP29 climate conference say it should be contributing to funds to help other developing countries end their reliance on fossil fuels, and also to cope with the impacts of climate change. Another reason is the size of China's economy, which is the second largest in the world, and built to a large part on industry. Yet it is still considered a developing country under the United Nations climate change framework. While not officially contributing to a globally agreed climate finance goal of $100 billion, China says it has provided around $24.5 billion in financing since 2016. And it has invested heavily in solar and wind power and electric cars. In 2023, the state spent more than $273 billion on renewable energy, followed by Europe, which spent around half of that, and then the United States, Asia and Oceania, and Brazil.
China's case also clearly shows once the climate solutions can make economic sense, it will develop really, really fast.
It's unclear whether China has already reached peak fossil fuel emissions, but if not, it will soon. And that, along with its push for green energy, will put it on a path to decarbonization. Whether it will take more financial responsibility for its growth is still up in the air.
Niklas Höhne is a founding partner of the NewClimate Institute, and he joins us now from the COP29 Climate Summit in Baku. Welcome to DW, Niklas. Your institute has published the Climate Change Performance Index 2025 today. That lists China as one of the lowest performing countries. Tell us why.
Yeah, China is on rank 55 of 67 countries that we are looking at, so that's not really good, and that is because greenhouse gas emissions in China continue to rise. Also, their emissions per capita are relatively high, almost twice as much as those in the EU. So we see two trends that are cancelling each other out. On the one hand, the economy is going strong, more energy is used, more fossil fuel is used, more fossil fuel power plants are being built. On the other hand, there's also a lot of new investments in renewable energy. Actually, they've met their renewable energy target well ahead of schedule, and also every second car is now an electric car that is sold in China and curbing oil emissions. So right now, we hope that the peak in greenhouse gas emissions is soon met in China, and then emissions can go down, but so far it's still going up.
Okay, so good news and bad news. From what you're hearing and seeing at COP29, I mean, how much pressure is being exerted on China at this conference to push for being more ambitious, to push for more ambitious climate targets?
Yeah, an important benchmark here is whether global greenhouse gas emissions reach a peak and then decline. And China is so big, it's a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions. So if China peaks and declines, then also global greenhouse gas emissions peak and decline. And that's why there's a lot of pressure on China to come forward with new targets. China has used a very conservative approach in the past. They only propose something here internationally that they're 100% sure to meet. So if they propose something, we can be sure it will be met, and probably much more can be done. So for example, they have overachieved their renewable target. They will hopefully peak emissions well before 2030, which is their current target. But in order to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, global greenhouse gas emissions need to be reduced drastically by 2030. And that's why everybody's hoping that China can propose a target on a significant reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And they can, because renewables are really expanding very, very fast in China. And that is a big opportunity for China to make a important contribution to the international climate policy, especially now that the US is moving out of the focus, and maybe there's a gap that China can fill.
Right. And negotiators at COP29 are also saying, aren't they, that China should be contributing to funds to help other developing countries and their reliance on fossil fuels. Do you see the possibility of China stepping up to take more financial responsibility?
Yeah, also here China is very conservative. They didn't want to be mentioned officially as contributing to climate finance, but in reality they already do. Yeah? They finance a lot of projects outside of their country. Right now it's at least 3 billion a year that they finance in green projects out of China. And I think there's a little bit of movement that we can see from China here at the negotiations. They use some language that has been only used for developed countries, although China says they want to be classified as a developing country. And so I'm very hopeful that they can come forward with more actions, and also that these actions are recognized because, well, they're already providing climate finance. And for them it's also good because China is a powerhouse, no? They produce 80% of global solar modules. They produce 60% of wind turbines. They produce 60% of EVs that are sailed globally. So if they support the transition, they can also benefit from it economically.
Niklas Höhne from the NewClimate Institute and joining us from the COP29 Climate Summit. Niklas, thank you so much for your insights there.
Thank you.